There are two types of process flow diagrams Microsoft Visio supports and provides templates for: basic flowchart and cross-functional flowchart. Basic flowchart allows you to define process flow, versus cross-functional, which is also called Swimlane flowchart, allows you to define process flow, but in addition you define actors in separate swim lanes. And this diagram is extremely helpful to separate roles and responsibilities, specifically for asymmetrics. The best way to create basic flowchart process flow diagram is to use basic flowchart template in Visio. I used it recently, so it shows up in my recently viewed templates. If you don't see it right away, you can search for it using the search bar and select it from the search results. To start creating the diagram, all you need to do is to drag shapes into the diagram and start connecting them. I'm working with Patricia on the marketing project to create a video for our flagman product. We both report to John. Because of the extremely heavy workload, John suggested that we add additional team member into our team. John gave us 5 considerations to build effective hiring process. He suggested that we should first define job description for the position. We should build this job description keeping in mind internal and external candidates. He also suggested that we should define where we're going to advertise open role. And he recommended that we screen resumes for external candidates and talk to the managers for internal candidates. He also suggested that we set upfront rules for the interview and the hiring decision process. Every basic flowchart diagram has a starting and ending point. You use the start shape to define the start of the process, and then add a text start into the shape of the diagram. Rectangular boxes define process shapes. You add the description for the process step into the rectangular box. For example, as John suggested, the first step in every recruitment hiring process should be defined job position description. You add title to the diagram by using the text tool. You select the text tool, select the area, and type the name of the diagram. There are 3 main tools that you most likely will be using and switching between in Microsoft Visio. You use pointer tool to work with shapes. You use connector tool to connect shapes. And you use text tool to add text into the diagram. All 3 tools are located on the Home ribbon tab, and you can see currently selected tool in the tools group on the ribbon. There are 3 major ways how you can add additional shapes onto the diagram. You can drag the shape, and you see Visio has grid lines that allows you to position the shape among the existing shapes to make diagram look professional. Once you've added additional shape and updated the text on the shape, you can connect both shapes using connector tool. You select connector tool and drag the line from one shape to another. You need to switch back to pointer tool to add additional shapes to the diagram. Second major way to add shapes onto the diagram is to select existing shape, use copy, and use paste. You can update the text on the copied shape in a very similar way, and then you can drag the shape to position it at the same distance and along the grid lines with existing shapes. You need to switch to the connector tool to drag the line from the existing shape to the new shape. And the third and probably the most effective way of adding shapes into the diagram is to use the extension tools in Visio that are available for the flowchart diagrams. To see them better, I'm going to zoom in, and then once you hover the shape, you see the extension triangle, which shows all available shapes that you can add and connect from the existing shape. For example, my next step is the decision, whether this is internal or external candidate. To add decision into the flowchart diagram, I need to use diamonds. And as you can see, once I selected the diamond, it added not just the diamond, but also added a connector from the existing shape to the diamond. Typically, the decision on the decision shape is Boolean, yes or no, but sometimes it depends based on the question that you're asking in the decision box. In my case, the hiring process might be different for internal versus external candidates. For internal candidate, I might choose to talk to the manager, and I will represent this step with the action box for the process flow. I may also consider specifying that this is an internal branch in the process flow by selecting and double-clicking on the arrow and adding internal text. For external candidates, my process might be slightly different. I may choose to do initial phone screening to get the initial impression about the candidate and to determine their interest and salary range for the position they're applying for. My next step might be the same for both types of candidates, as I would need to make a decision whether to invite them for the interview. Considering the circumstances, one of the best ways to represent this step might be to copy an existing shape and paste it as a new shape. Once I rename this shape, I can position it along with other shapes and connect it from both internal candidate as well as external candidate, as I would need to make a decision whether to invite them for the interview. If you've noticed that something is missing, for example, external branch is missing on the arrow, you can just double-click on the arrow and add the text. Sometimes you may also realize that you connected arrows to the wrong places on the box. For example, decision box typically has one input and at least two outputs. And might be hard for me to represent the output from this decision without crossing the lines. So I might consider changing the input lines to the left input place in the diamond shape. To do that, I would need to select the line and drag the endpoint of the line and connect it to a different input point. I can also consider doing the same thing for another line. Now I will be able to show both positive and negative decision outputs right on the diagram. For example, for negative decision, I might choose to send an email, and I'll show this as a process flow step with the appropriate text. I can send either email or regular mail letter, and you would want to separate actions with some sort of separator. And I chose to use slash, but you can use something else on your diagram. To show that this is a negative decision, you might want to add no to the arrow that is output from the decision-making process. If you choose to invite candidate to the interview, you may consider showing this as a process step in the diagram. The process step might have a name in-person interview, or you might consider reflecting that this also might be a Zoom meeting because of the COVID-19. After conducting the interview, you may need to make a decision. If you choose to hire a candidate, you might consider communicating this information to the candidate in the form of letter of offer, and you would need to reflect it with the yes flow on the diagram. If you choose not to hire a candidate, your process might reflect sending a rejection letter to the candidate, and you reflect it with the connector, connecting it to the send rejection email process step. And you might highlight this branch as the no branch on the diagram. As usual, if you notice that branches are missing, for example, in my case, invite for the interview is missing the yes text on the arrow, you can always add it by editing the arrow in the diagram. Communicating offer to the candidate concludes this process flow and can be reflected with the and symbol on the diagram. In a similar way, sending rejection email also concludes the process flow and could be concluded with the same symbol. Keep in mind that process flow can only have one starting point but can have multiple endpoints. The easiest way to start building Swimlane diagram in Microsoft Visio is to find Swimlane template. Template comes with the title area as well as the two swim lanes. To assign your own title to the diagram based on what you're trying to build, you double-click on the title and type the new name. You assign names to the swim lanes in the same way by double-clicking the name of the swim lane and typing the new name. You draw the diagram by dragging the shapes from the stencils area in Microsoft Visio onto the diagram. Every swim lane diagram typically has a starting point, and for our particular process of purchase order approval process, the requester will be gathering details for the purchase order and creating purchase order approval request. Microsoft Visio provides you 3 different ways to add shapes to the diagram. You can drag shapes from the stencils area right onto the diagram. Once shape is in place, you can double-click on the shape and add the required text. To connect the shapes, you need to switch to Connector tool and draw the line in between the shapes. Second way of adding shapes onto Swimlane diagram is by copying shape and pasting it. You can update the text on the shape in the same way by double-clicking on the shape and replacing existing text with the new text. When you drag this shape, Visio provides grid lines so you can place the shape along with other shapes on the same diagram. And you draw the line between the shapes by switching to Connector mode and drawing the line. The third way of adding the shape is the easiest because it allows you to add the shape and connect the line in the same step. To do that, you use triangles at the end of the shape and pick the next step from the list of available shapes, and as a last step, type the text by double-clicking on the shape and typing the text. As you can see, by using the third method, we've accomplished multiple objectives. We created new shape, new line was automatically added, and shape was placed along with other shapes to make the diagram look very professional. There are three main scenarios when you might consider using cross-functional swimlane diagram. The first scenario is when you need to define specific actors. You need to specifically outline who is doing what in the process. Second scenario is when you need to define specific roles and responsibilities. And the third scenario is combination of the first two, as organizations frequently use RACI matrix to define who is responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed in the process flow. Typically, after order is created in the system, direct supervisor or manager need to approve the acquisition. To do that, we need to show this as a step in another swim lane. Because this is a decision step, we need to show it with the diamond shape, but I already put in the rectangular shape, which shows the process. In fact, I did it on purpose to demonstrate you another cool capability of Microsoft Visio of changing the shapes. You do it by navigating to the home ribbon and choosing the Change Shape button, where you can pick the shape and replace one shape with another shape. You type the text in the diamond shape the same way as you would do in a regular shape. Typically, for the decision shape, there is one input and multiple outputs. One output might be when manager doesn't approve the request. We need to show it with the N shape. And to show the branch of not approving, we double-click on the line and type the text. If manager approves the request, it needs to go to procurement department for processing. As you can see, we don't have a procurement department swim lane, and we can edit in multiple ways. One way is to drag the swim lane from the stencils box directly onto the diagram, and then snap it right into existing diagram. Another, and I think much easier way, is to select an existing swim lane, right mouse click, and say Insert Swim Lane After. To give diagram a title, you double-click on the existing title and type the new name. Typically, procurement department starts their process by requesting quotes from multiple vendors. To reflect this, we need to add a process step in the procurement swim lane. Then add a title to the process box, and then connect shapes using connector. We also would like to make sure to reflect that this happens after manager approves the original request. Procurement department is typically also responsible for selecting the vendor. They do it as another process step in the diagram, and we can reflect it as a separate shape in procurement swim lane. As you might have noticed, I was frequently switching between pointer tool and connector tool in Microsoft Visio. These tools are among three most used tools in Microsoft Visio application. In addition to pointer and connector tool, there is also a text tool, and all three of them are located in the Tools section of the ribbon. You use pointer tool to position the shapes. With the pointer tool, you can drag the shape, you can resize the shape, and you can access properties of the shape. Using connector tool, you can connect shapes by dragging the line and connecting the two shapes. You need to switch back to the pointer tool to delete the line. And you delete the line by selecting the line and clicking Cut, or using Delete button on the keyboard. The text tool allows you to bring in text into the diagram. When you select the text tool, you position the cursor and you start typing. To delete the text, you need to switch back to the pointer tool. Select the text and either use Cut or Delete button on the keyboard. Once vendor is selected, procurement department is also responsible to update original order with how they've made a decision and which vendors they have contacted. And as a next step, they are in charge to request approval from CFO, Chief Financial Officer. I want to pinpoint that what just happened is very cool. We've added a shape that originally didn't fit into the diagram, but Microsoft Visio expanded swim lanes automatically to fit the shape, and it will continue to do it as you add additional shapes. We do have additional swim lane for CFO, Chief Financial Officer, but we do not have it named correctly. So we need to go back and give it the right name. If you are like me and trying to avoid usage of the acronyms, you might want to consider adding the full name of the Chief Financial Officer right into the swim lane. After receiving the purchase order with all the required information, Chief Financial Officer needs to make a decision whether this is the right thing to do for the organization to acquire these goods or services. If Chief Financial Officer decides not to proceed with this acquisition, the process ends. But if CFO decides to proceed, it goes back to the procurement team, and procurement team sends details of the purchase order to the vendor. What's interesting, when I expanded to the next step using embedded features of the Visio, it created a box in CFO swim lane. But this process step is not done by CFO, but rather is done by procurement team. To reflect that, we just need to drag the shape and place it right in the procurement swim lane. We can also change the way arrow is connected. Instead of connecting from the left, we can connect the arrow from the bottom. I did this by dragging the end of the arrow from one spot to another. We also might want to reflect that this step happens only if CFO approves original purchase order. Next step in the process goes back to the original requester, where requester needs to work with the vendor to receive goods or services. By default, box was added into the manager swim lane, but we need to drag the box back into the requester swim lane and position it along the grid lines Microsoft Visio provides. This step concludes the process, which should be reflected by the and symbol in the swim lane diagram. Diagram we have developed looks okay, but kind of plain. We can do a few things to make it look more professional and better meet our needs. One thing I would recommend you do first is to navigate to Design tab and try different design themes. Microsoft Visio provides a lot of different design themes, and you can pick based on your company's logo or based on some other criteria that are important to you. I like this theme, which is called linear, but your preferences obviously might be different. Once you select the theme, you can pick the variant based off of the theme. Variant leaves the fonts, sizes, main ideas of the theme in place, but allows you to pick different colors. I like the second variant as it provides calmer colors. Few things I'd like to pinpoint as we change the theme. For example, you see that the start shape, as well as diamonds for the decision making, got painted in a different color. I believe this is a good thing because it highlights the importance of the start and end points, as well as it highlights the importance of the decision-making diamonds. In addition to changing the theme, Visio provides you a quick opportunity to change the background. You can upload your own image or select from the pre-built images for the background. You might have noticed that because we're using cross-functional flowchart template from Microsoft, Visio added an additional tab which is specific to just this particular type of diagram. If you navigate to this tab, you can do a lot of different things. For example, you can show or hide separators in between the diagram and the swim lanes. You can show or hide title bar. You can choose different styles for your diagram, specific to swim lane type diagram. You can also arrange your shapes differently by changing the margins on the diagram. You can also change the direction of the flow with one click, from left to right to left. And you can also change the orientation of the diagram from horizontal to vertical with just one click. I'm going to stick with the original type of diagram and just click the undo button. There are also some additional options available to insert swim lane, separators, or new page, and I would recommend you explore them on your own. Why Mind Map is so effective? There are 5 main reasons. It is the best tool available today to learn material fast. Mind mapping allows you to quickly understand important concepts, connect information you're learning to existing knowledge you already have, build associations with existing topics you already know, and recall material that you're learning much faster. You can use mind maps to help you study at school, college, or university. Mind maps will help you brainstorm new ideas, solve problems effectively. Mind mapping will help you with the effective decision-making, event planning. It will help you make your meetings more effective. And what's extremely important in today's world, it will help you effectively collaborate remotely. The fastest way to create mind mapping diagram in Visio is to search for available template. Once you are in the drawing screen, mind mapping diagram, which is also called brainstorming diagram, has 5 shapes in Visio: main topic, multiple topics, dynamic connector, and association line. To start building the diagram, you need to start with the main topic. Let's say that my main topic I'm trying to brainstorm is how to learn effectively. To capture it in the main topic bubble, I need to double-click on the bubble and type in the name. Let's assume that there are 5 main concepts we're trying to adopt for effective learning: taking notes, connecting new concepts to existing knowledge, asking questions if something is not clear, visualizing concepts, and reviewing the examples. Let's represent these 5 concepts on the diagram. To add subtopic to the main topic, you need to click on the shape and click Add Subtopic. Once in place, you need to double-click on the subtopic and type the new text. You can add additional 4 subtopics in the same way. Let's take a look at a couple things Microsoft Visio provides to make your diagram effective. Number 1 is outline window. Here you see that we have main topic and we have 5 subtopics. You can edit things right here, or you can get to the specific subtopic. By default, if you add subtopics through the right mouse click, they are added on the left side and on the right side from the main bubble. It might be okay for you. If you need to change this behavior, keep in mind that you can reconnect the subtopic to any areas of existing bubble. Keep in mind that mind map is just a concept. It doesn't matter which tool do you use. I use Microsoft Visio because it's just much easier for me to present it on the screen. But in addition to digital options, you might very well be using chalkboard or pen and paper. It is very important that you focus on the ideas and the concepts and the thought process of what you're trying to document, not on the tool. Couple considerations though to keep in mind. Always plan for revisions. It is good to use the tool where you can erase and edit the information. And another important thing is that mind map can be used as a comprehension tool for yourself. You don't need anybody else to build effective mind map. And at the same time, it could be used as very effective collaboration tool when you're working with the team. There are a couple cool options available to change the design of the diagram without changing the functionality. Because we're using brainstorming template, Microsoft Visio added brainstorming tab, and there are multiple options in this tab. In addition to adding topics or rearranging items on the screen automatically, you have an option of changing the diagram style. When you click on the diagram style button, you can switch between different styles that are available. For example, I might like elliptical style. Let's see how it's going to look. I think I'm okay with this, so I'm going to click OK. One other cool option that I use a lot, outline window, you can enable it here or disable it here. In an outline window, you can see the entire structure of the diagram by just expanding and going through the tree. After changing the design, some of the text no longer fits into the box. So what you can do, you can either expand the box, or in my case, I'd like to keep the boxes the same. Or in this case, it's not boxes, it's ovals. I'm typically just changing the length of the text and reducing the text. For example, instead of connect to existing knowledge, I'll just leave existing knowledge. And here, instead of visualize concept, I can maybe have it on a different line if I really want to keep both, or I can just leave the word visualize. Other features that might help you improve appeal of the diagram are available in the Design tab. Here you have multiple themes, and you can go through the themes and see how your diagram will look with the different theme. Let's say that you picked the theme, and now you have access to variants. Variants will keep all elements of the theme, but will allow just to change the colors. You can also change the background of the diagram by picking particular background that you might like, or uploading your own image for the background. I'm going to do undo and leave the background white because it's easier to see on the screen. And last but not least is adding some borders and title. If you're doing a formal diagram, maybe for your project, or trying to do additional information, maybe like copyright or something else on your diagram, good idea might be to introduce the border, pick the color that match, in this case colors do not match, and then include the date information, include title of the diagram, include author, and include copyright. I'm going to undo this step as well and show you one last feature that you can take advantage of, which is re-layout of the diagram. Visio allows you to automatically change the layouts based on the different styles, so you can pick something that best matches your needs. One of the main reasons mind mapping diagram is so effective is because it comes natively to our brain. The way neurons fire in our brain matches precisely how things are built in the mind mapping diagram. Even though our brain contains 100 billion neurons and support cells, it works best to create and connect ideas and thoughts and not to store them. Similar to the way items represented on the mind mapping diagram, our brain activates and fires neurons to connect the ideas and recall the information. For example, when you start thinking, how can I learn more effectively, you might recall the fragment from this video, which would say that one of the ways to do it is using existing knowledge. Then you would ask yourself a question: how would I connect new information to something that I already know? And your answer might be, maybe I should research the topic, maybe I should pre-read something before the meeting or before the lecture, or maybe I can do Google search to learn more so I can easily connect information to what I already know. Have you ever wondered how somebody could memorize the deck of cards, specifically the order of the cards in the deck, and then recall it one by one, by one by one. Let me open you the biggest secret of all. These people do not have any special abilities. They do not have a bigger brain. And you can do it also. The most popular way to memorize something and recall it on demand when you need it is to connect the information to something you already know. One of the most popular techniques these people use is called house walk. And guess what? It looks precisely as a mind map diagram. This is how it works. Everybody lives somewhere, and wherever you live, you might have house entrance, living room, family room, or bedroom, or some variations of those. First, you build a path of how you're going to walk through the house. You enter through the entrance, then you go to the living room, then you go to the family room, and then you go to the bedroom. Let's say that you're trying to memorize 6 of diamonds and associate it with the front entrance. To build strong association, it has to be something unusual and something very weird. Something that doesn't exist in the real world. This way our brain will remember it. For example, can you imagine your entire front door as 6 of diamonds, with the door handle right where it should be? Or can you imagine the door with 6 diamond rings hanging right in front of you? The more weird and the more unusual it is, the better chances you have for your brain to remember it. Going back to our original example, the people that can memorize hundreds of cards or hundreds of names do not have any special abilities. All of this is the trained ability. They just trained themselves to create better associations, to better connect the new information to something that they already know. And through repetition, they achieved mastery here and can surprise millions of people that maybe don't practice this every day. Same way they use the simple techniques to accomplish extraordinary results, you can use mind maps to accomplish your goals. There are unlimited examples of where you can use mind maps, but some of the most common ones are you can use it to study to learn more effectively, to brainstorm new ideas, to solve problems, to help with your decision-making process, to do event planning, to make meetings more effective, and to collaborate remotely. One of the coolest things about mind map is that you can keep expanding the levels of it until you find all the answers or come to the solutions. For example, when you were doing initial brainstorming, you might have come up with 5 different ideas of how to learn more effectively as a student. You can take notes, you connect new information to existing knowledge, you can ask questions, you can visualize concepts, you can review and process the examples. Let's look at how can we take this information to the next level. For example, to take more effective notes, you can use OneNote application, and you can also review your notes more regularly. You can also do a couple things to connect new knowledge to something you already know. For example, you can research the topic before the lecture. You can also pre-read the book chapter, and you can also do online Google search on the topic. What's interesting is that online Google search and pre-reading of the book chapter could be variations of the research topic before lecture. It doesn't matter where you put them, as long as you capture the idea on the mind map and also follow the process. You can also improve your learning by asking additional questions. For example, you can collaborate with other students, or you can join the professor or teaching assistant with your questions during their office hours. Another way to learn effectively is to visualize the concepts that you're studying. You can do it better by adding pictures and diagrams right into your note. Another idea might be for you to become a tutor and explain the concept and topic to somebody else, and draw the pictures and diagrams for these people to help them understand what's going on. And last but not least way of improving your knowledge is constantly looking for the examples. For example, what I like to do, I constantly ask myself question, how is this useful? Can it be used in my life? How other people are using this knowledge? Can I learn something from them? And what are the practical examples of implementing this concept as something useful in the real world? We did 2 levels of mind mapping in this diagram from the main topic. Do you know any other ways how it could be improved and extended? Could you please share your comments and thoughts in the comment section of this video? The best way to create entity relationship diagram in Visio is to search for the keyword database. Even though there is UML database notation template available, I prefer Crow's Food database notation because it provides more flexibility. In Crow's Food database notation, there are only 6 stencils available, but they provide tremendous flexibility and everything necessary to build an exceptional ERD diagram. The main purpose behind entity relationship diagram is to provide documentation as well as to align everybody on the database model. ERD diagram shows the relationships of entities stored in a database. It also shows logic and business rules associated with the data. And this information can be represented by logical data model, which is independent from database implementation. To show specific technical implementation for particular database, you typically use physical data model ERD diagram. If you do not need to describe data types, you use simple entity stencils. But if you do need data types, then you use entity with attribute. Data types are represented on the right-hand side. Typically, they are exclusive, and you don't mix both types. For the purposes of my demo, I will be using entities without data types. I'm going to delete this entity, and you delete it by selecting it and using the delete button. We will be building online e-commerce store ERD diagram. To add the title to the diagram, you select the text and then type the title of the diagram. There are three main entities that are relevant for online e-commerce store diagram. The first relevant entity is customers. To change the current entity we have on the screen to customers, you click on the title and type the name. Next step is to assign attributes to the entity. You can do it by clicking on the attribute name and typing the attribute. But before we go ahead and do it, let's take a look at the key terms used in ERD diagrams. Entity could be presented on ERD diagram without data types. Most of the entities also require unique identifiers. These unique identifiers called primary key and foreign keys. Primary keys used on the entity itself to define uniqueness. Foreign keys are used to reference primary keys and typically used to define relationships. In addition to defining entities with their attributes and data types, you also need to define relationships between entities. These relationships are called cardinalities. Typically, customer's entity contains at least 7 main attributes. You have customer ID, which uniquely identifies the customer. You also have customer email, password, name, and phone. You also have billing address and shipping address. One thing I'd like to point out is that some data modelers would like to just give primary key a name of ID. This way, name would be identical to all the IDs for all the entities that you create. This might be a good idea, and it will provide some simplicity if you decide to follow the standard. After defining customers, we can now define orders. If orders entity is very similar to customers, you can just copy and paste it, and then make all necessary modifications. Instead of doing that, I'm going to delete this entity and bring in brand new entity. Typically, order entity will also have unique identifier. It will also have order amount, shipping address, order email, order date, and order status. To show all products customer placed on the order, we need to introduce new entity. It is typically called order details or order line item. Order line item will have unique ID, price, SKU, and quantity. Each order line item is linked to the product in our catalog. Let's introduce the product entity. Typically, products entity will have unique ID, SKU, product name, price, weight, product description, image or link to the image, and thumbnail or link to the thumbnail. As you have learned, to define successful ERD diagram, you need to define entities with the attributes and data types. You need to create unique identifiers in the form of primary and foreign keys. And you need to define relationships in the form of cardinality. Cardinality is typically defined as a line connecting two entities. And on both sides of the line, you can have different symbols. There are at least 4 types of cardinalities available. And for simplicity, we put the symbol only on the right side of the line. 0 or more cardinality, 1 or more, 1 and only 1 cardinality, and 0 or 1 cardinality. To define relationships, you need to use relationship stencil. You just drag it into the diagram and then connect 2 entities with relationship stencil. You can adjust locations of the entities to make sure the line is straight. To do that, you select the entity and you can use either mouse or keyboard. Using keyboard provides you with higher precision. A relationship between customers and orders is one-to-many. One customer can have many orders. To reflect this relationship, we need to assign 1 and only 1 on the customer side and 1 or more on the order side. To do this, you need to select the relationship line and do right mouse click and set begin symbol as 1 and only 1 on the customer side and send end symbol as 1 or more. So this way, one customer can have many orders, and this relationship shows this cardinality. Now there's still something missing here, and this something is unique ID of the customer on a particular order. Right now we only have order ID presented on the diagram. Now we need to represent customer ID for the particular order. To do that, we need to add an additional attribute on the orders table. You add additional attribute by selecting an existing attribute and clicking Insert Primary Key after. The only difference, it's not going to be primary key and it's going to be foreign key. Because of that, we need to make a couple adjustments. We need to select the attribute and do right-click and set foreign key and uncheck primary key. We also need to rename this attribute by double-clicking on the attribute and adding a new name, which would be customer ID. So now we have relationship between customer, where customer is represented by unique ID, and orders. Each order now can be linked back to the particular customer. There are a couple important rules related to primary key. Primary key is unique across the particular table. Primary key is also static, it never changes. And the third rule is primary key cannot be null. The value of primary key cannot be empty. In a similar way as we defined relationship between customers and orders, we need to define relationship between orders and order line items. One order can have many order line items. And in a similar way, the relationship needs to be defined between order line items and products. One product can be on many line items, so there is one-to-many relationship between product and order line items. For both of these relationships, we need to define cardinality as well as primary foreign key relationships. Once you define all the relationships, you can rearrange the objects so they fit the available space much better, or as you see fit. One important consideration I'd like to point out is that the foreign key is outside of primary key. This separator line separates primary key and other attributes. Because foreign key is not part of the primary key, it should be outside of the primary key, so it should be below the line. This diagram already looks great, but you can make it look even better. Some people are very particular and would like to use specific color themes for their diagrams. I have great news for these people. Microsoft Visio provides exceptional capabilities to improve design and make your Visio diagrams looks extremely professional. To change the design, you navigate to the Design tab, and by default, you have a lot of choices for the themes. You can select any available theme, and as you navigate through the themes, it will change the design on the fly. So you can pick any design that you'd like. For example, I like this design because the dark blue contrasts with the red color for the logo, and both red and blue are primary color on the color wheel. Once you have selected design, you can choose variants for that particular design. It will leave fonts and design in place, but would allow you to select and refine the colors. If you need to, you can also change the background. You can choose background with the particular color, or you can choose background maybe as a grayish color with the specific attributes. In addition to changing background color, you can also consider adding borders and titles. Not everything will match with your theme, but you can try different options that are available. Once you're happy with the design, you can use Save As option and save your diagram as PDF file to share with your colleagues and team members. The best way to create UML sequence diagram is to find available template. To do that, you need to search for UML sequence, and it will bring in multiple results. Both of them have been built by Microsoft, and most likely they will both work just fine for you. Couple things to consider here. Some of the diagram templates contain examples already. It's good to see how the sequence diagram may look like, and you can preview this by clicking on the template and see the sample from the template. When you create new Visio diagram that has a sample, you see sample on the top and sequence of steps that might be helpful for you at the bottom. If you need to do sequence diagram with loop, you may consider using this sample. This sample shows you actor and two objects, as well as the interaction loop. And the last sample provided by Microsoft is even more sophisticated. It shows you interaction frame with multiple conditions. I will not be using any pre-built samples, and I will just start from scratch. Once you create new Visio diagram using the template, you see multiple stencils available for UML sequence diagram. This set of stencils is everything that you need to create an effective sequence diagram to represent your system. So what is UML sequence diagram? Sequence diagram is designed to represent how entities in the system interact and collaborate. In the example of online e-commerce store, when customer comes to the website, customer can search the system, and system will return back the items that match searching criteria. The interactions between the customer and the store is shown by two lines. The first is the search line, customer sending a message to the store. And second is the line coming back from e-commerce store back to the customer. The big importance of sequence diagram is that it shows the sequence. And this is extremely important because sequence diagram is one of the few diagrams that shows and focuses on dynamic interactions between the entities. Sequence diagram also can represent optional events or conditional events. The example of optional event might be customer logging into the system. Logging into the system is not represented in this diagram, but maybe it should be. A lot of times, e-commerce websites retain your login information in the form of cookies, and next time you come to visit, you already logged in. Example of conditional interaction is shown in this frame. When customer needs to check out, they need to have an account in the system. If they're a new customer, they can create an account, but if they are an existing customer, they need to log in. The biggest power of sequence diagram is that it shows step-by-step interactions and focus on the order of interactions and shows them visually. To start building sequence diagram, you just bring in entities from available list of stencils in the stencil box. The first entity would be a customer. Once you have entity in place, you can assign name to the entity by double-clicking on the box. You see the font here is a little bit bigger, so we can select it and reduce the font size. We will have two other entities in this diagram, e-commerce store and payment gateway. Couple important considerations here. When I bring an entity, Visio shows grid lines. It allows you to place entities on the same level with other entities. It also shows you the distance between the entities, so you can place entities at the same distance. For the purposes of e-commerce diagram, customer is also called an actor, and e-commerce store and payment gateway would be called objects. Interactions between customer, e-commerce store, and payment gateway would be defined using messages. And messages could be primary message, return message, or self-message. To define a message, we use message stencil. We just drag it and place it right on the lifeline, and then we extend it to the next object. The first thing that customers do when they come to the e-commerce store, they search for particular item. Once you have message in place, you can double-click on the message and type in the activity. One thing you might consider changing right away is the color of the message, because green typically doesn't match well with blue and red. So I'm going to change it to black. To do that, you select the message and then select the fill and then click on the line to make sure you select the black color. To change the color of the text, you need to have the message selected and click on the font and select color for the font. Once customer submits the search for items they're looking for, e-commerce engine returns back the list of items that match search criteria. To represent the return message, we can bring in the new message stencil, or we can copy and paste an existing stencil. Copying existing stencil might be more beneficial because we already have styles that we defined by changing the colors. To copy stencil, all you need to do is just select it and do copy, and then just do paste. And then because this is a return message, all we need to do is to change the direction for the message. And then the last step is to assign what this message is going to be doing. We keep adding more messages as we continue defining the interactions. You can also use keyboard shortcuts like Ctrl-C and Ctrl-V to copy the messages. And now, because we have messages going in both directions, you can copy the matching message with the matching direction. Once customer reviews the items available based on the search criteria, they can add items to the cart. An e-commerce store can display items in the cart. Once all items have been added, customer can start the checkout process. At this point, they will be presented with account screen, where they can choose either to sign up with the new account or log in with the existing account. Because creation of the new account versus logging in with existing account is the condition, we would need an alternative block to represent this condition on the sequence diagram. To represent this condition on the diagram, we bring an alternative fragment right into the diagram. It shows alt for the alternative condition, and it shows condition 1 and condition 2. After you change the colors to adjust better to other colors in the diagram, you might end up with the block like this, which will have two conditions: for registered customers that would be required to log in, or for the new customers that would be required to sign up. And you can represent alternative actions with login message or create new account message accordingly. As our diagram continues to grow, we need longer lifeline messages here. You extend lifeline by selecting it and just dragging the end of it until you're satisfied with the new length. And we will continue with the customer checkout flow. Assuming that as part of the new account registration process, customer will enter the address, the next step would be for customer to enter the payment options. At this point, customer should be able to enter payment method. Once customer entered payment method, it needs to be validated with the payment gateway, which is another object in our diagram. And so far, this object didn't get any actions and didn't receive any messages. After customer entered payment method, e-commerce store will send the message to payment gateway to validate payment method. And at this point, we come to another alternative condition, because payment method could be either accepted or rejected by payment gateway. If payment was accepted, payment gateway will issue payment confirmation. E-commerce store will be the first one to receive this payment confirmation. And e-commerce store would need to communicate the payment confirmation back to the customer. Successful payment confirmation typically indicates successful order confirmation, because typically it indicates valid entry of the credit card information. As alternative condition, payment method could be rejected. There are multiple reasons why payment might be rejected, but one of them might be that the payment method is not valid. And in case entered payment method is not valid, e-commerce store would need to prompt customer to re-enter payment information. The best way to jumpstart on UML class diagram is to use provided template. If you search for available templates, Microsoft Visio provides 2 templates for UML class diagrams. One is just simple UML class template, and second one is UML class with interfaces. Depending what you're trying to build, you can choose either available template. To start building class diagram, all you need to do is to bring the stencil and start populating the members of the class. So what is UML class diagram and why do we need it? UML class diagram is intended to provide a blueprint for entire system design. This blueprint works very well regardless of which programming language you use to build your system. And the reason it works so extremely well is because UML class diagram shows what types of objects you will be building. It shows objects' properties and methods, as well as static relationships between objects. To start editing class in Microsoft Visio, all you need to do is click on the class name. In this video, we will be building UML class diagram for online e-commerce store. Let's look at the typical classes we might need for this type of diagram. There is minimum of 2 classes we might need. First one is customer. Customer typically has name, address, phone. We also would like to capture search history of the customer, as well as allow customer to place the order. I would like to pinpoint couple considerations for the customer class. Customer always has name, address, and phone, and typically this is a single one-to-one relationship between customer and these types of attributes. Search history done by the customer on online e-commerce website typically represents multiple items. I highlighted first 4 items on the list as blue, indicating that they are the attributes of the class, versus placing order, which is something that is done by the customer as an action. This leads us to very important consideration, as each class can contain properties which represent data attributes of the class, as well as methods which represent behaviors of what class can do. Both properties and methods are members of the class, but you use above the line area in the class to show properties, and you use below the line area in the class to show methods. For example, to add customer name as an attribute, you just double-click on the member name and type in name and then define what type of attribute it is going to be. In our case, it is string. Then you hit enter. To insert address, we would need additional space above the line. To get it, we need to right mouse click on the name, which is an existing attribute, and say we're trying to insert member after. Once the placeholder for the new attribute was added, we can just edit it and add address as another attribute. Because search history can contain more than one item, we will come back to define the type of data attribute that the search history will represent. Methods for the class defined in very similar way. All you need to do is to double-click on the existing method and type in the actual name for the method. If you need to add additional methods, you can right-click and say Insert Member After. To define e-commerce order class, we need to bring in the new class object and define properties and methods for the class. Couple important considerations here. Based on the limitations of programming languages, there cannot be any spaces in between the words of the attribute name or method name. So you see there are no spaces in between search history and place order. Another important consideration, class doesn't have to have both properties and methods. It can only contain properties, like in case of order. So if we don't have any methods, we can just remove this element. In addition to defining properties and methods, UML class diagram also helps you define relationships between classes. There are many types of relationships you can define in two main categories. First, you need to define plurality between objects. In this category, you define if the relationship is one-to-one or one-to-many. In general relationship category, you have at least 5 things to consider. For example, there is an association type relationship between customer and order. One customer can place many orders. To depict it on the diagram, you need to bring an association stencil and connect it between two objects. We can select the object and align them to make sure this is a straight line. The actual name of one-to-many relationship in UML is multiplicity relationship. By default, association line does not show multiplicity. To enable multiplicity, you need to select the line, do a right mouse click, and select Show Multiplicity. Typically, you show multiplicity by showing 1 next to the customer and showing many next to the order, and then deleting items that you don't need. Currently, this line shows association type relationship between customer and orders, and also shows one-to-many relationship between customer and order, because one customer can submit multiple orders. Generalization or inheritance relationship typically shows as is a relationship between child class and the parent class. Typically, this type of relationship is ideal to show reusable elements in the class diagram, because it shows that the child class inherits the common functionality defined in the parent class. For example, in the real world, there might be at least 2 types of customers: business customer and individual consumer customer. Both of these types of customers might inherit all the attributes and methods from the generic customer object. And in addition to this, they might have their own properties and methods specific to their function. For example, business customers may be approved to buy with purchase orders, and this is why it's important to have credit limits for business customers. They can also place their orders on credit, versus consumers who only are able to place orders using credit card. To show generalization type relationship in the class diagram, we need to use generalization stencil. Once we bring it into the picture, we can connect it to the objects and make sure the relationship is established. Once we've established relationship for one object, we can copy and paste the relationship stencil, or we can bring in the new one. Aggregation type relationship is created when one class is formed as a collection of other classes. For example, to represent search history for the customer, you might consider creating a dedicated class. It will be connected with the customer class through the search history ID, and it will contain the collection of the searched items. You might also have at least 2 methods if customer was looking for the particular item. To represent aggregation type relationship in the class diagram, you need to use aggregation stencil. Once you bring it to the diagram, you can connect it to the right object. You can also select the object and use keyboard arrow keys to move the object to get to the straight line in your connection. Composition relationship is a variation of aggregation relationship. Composition typically illustrates that a strong life cycle is present between the classes. Relationship between customer and search history items could be represented either by aggregation or by composition. If you feel that composition should be used, you can either bring in a new stencil, or you can just right mouse click on the existing relationship and change the connector type. You can do it by selecting a composition type relationship instead of aggregation. Realization relationship is typically used when one entity, typically an interface, defines a set of functionalities as a contract for another entity, which is typically just a regular class. In this relationship, class typically realizes the contract by implementing all the functionalities defined in the interface. For example, we might define an interface that will be called order processor. This interface will have 2 methods: validate payment and validate items availability. We might also consider defining 2 classes that will realize this interface: business order processor and consumer order processor. Business order processor class will realize all the methods of the interface and implement them, as well as it will implement one additional business order specific methods, which is validate credit limit. Very similar situation we will do with consumer order processor. Consumer order processor will realize all the methods and implement all of them for order processor interface, as well as consumer specific method, which is validate credit card. To show realization relationship between classes and interface, we can use realization stencil. Once you bring it, into the diagram, you can connect it to the relevant objects. Microsoft Visio provides excellent features to make your diagram look professional. For example, you can add your logo into the diagram and place it in any corner where you would like. You can also use align features of Visio to align the objects on the diagram. For example, the relationship between interfaces and classes doesn't look very straight. So we can zoom in into this area, we can move interface a little bit up, and then we can look at the lines to see how can we align these lines. And the best way to align the lines might be to align the objects themselves. To do that, we can select the objects, click Align, and we can align middle. And you see by aligning the objects, it aligned the lines as well. We can also use design features of Microsoft Visio to make the diagram look very professional. To do that, let's navigate to the Design tab on the ribbon, and then there are a lot of different themes available. All you need to do is switch between the themes to see which one fits what you're trying to accomplish the best. For example, I like this theme. It's called Linear. I'm going to select that. I can also select different variants that are available for this theme, which will bring in different variants for the given theme. You can also choose different colors within the variant. For example, if you like the variant, if you'd like how it looks, you can just play with the colors. You can also change the background for the diagram. You can either choose one of the available backgrounds that matches the theme, or you can bring in your own image that you think might be a good fit. Once you're done with the design, you can save diagram as PDF file. This is only one of the available options, and it allows you to distribute the diagram for many people that may not have Visio. Once you save it as PDF, Visio automatically brings up the Adobe PDF viewer and allow you to preview the diagram. And if you're using Microsoft Teams to collaborate with other people on your project, you can bring in Visio file by navigating to the Files tab in your channel, uploading the SDX file, and once file is in place, you can show the file as a separate tab if this information is important for every team member. To do that, you just need to click the plus button, select Microsoft Visio app, and pick the file. Now this file is available for everybody to view. There are multiple floor plan diagram templates available in Microsoft Visio. If you type floor plan into the search bar, you see office layout, home plan, floor plan, and a lot of other diagram types. The good thing about selecting office layout or home plan layout templates is that it allows you not just to design floor plan, but also add a furniture onto your floor plan diagram. For example, in office layout template, you will end up with multiple stencils. You will see walls, doors, and windows stencil, as well as stencils for office furniture and office equipment. The easiest way to start building floor plan diagram is to just drag the shape right onto the diagram. Visio provides room shapes, where you can drag the entire room into the diagram. Visio displays dimensions of the room, so you can adjust the size based on your need, and size of the room on the diagram changes as well. You can also add doors and adjust the door sizes as well as door location, as well as windows onto your diagram. Typically, floor plan diagram represents a diagram of the room or a building viewed from above. There are many benefits of floor plan diagrams. They help design and build homes. They also help design furniture layout, wiring systems, and a lot of other things, and with the right design, increase happiness and consumptions of the living space. Quality floor plan diagram also makes living space more desirable. A lot of times, it is also used as communication tools to do remodeling and additions to the living space. And last but not least, it is an extremely valuable tool for real estate agents and leasing companies to help sell or rent out living space, because it provides communications to buyers and sellers, as well as the measurements of the living space. Each object on the diagram allows you to access additional properties for this particular object. For example, there are 4 objects in this particular diagram. There is a room object, which if you do a right mouse click, allows you to access properties for this room. This is useful because if you're trying to set specific dimensions for the room, you have ability to set widths and lengths for the room right here in this dialog box. Different objects on the floor plan diagrams possess different features. For example, if we do a right mouse click on the door, we can reverse door in and out openings. We can change display options of what we're showing on the diagram, and we can add additional options for doors, walls, windows, and spaces. And if we're not happy with our selection or change, we can always do Ctrl-Z or use the undo button. Windows on the diagram have very similar set of properties as the doors. You can reverse in and out opening, and you can reverse left and right openings, as well as to set display options. You can also give title by double-clicking on a particular object and typing the title of the area or the name of the particular object. So what are some important considerations when you're working on a floor plan? One of the very important questions you might ask yourself before starting to work on the floor plan is, what is this floor plan for and who is the target audience? Some of the typical uses of the floor plans might be architectural floor plan, where you just show the dimensions of the area and how area is going to be used. You might also use floor plan to show home layout or office layout. If you're trying to depict an existing floor plan, you might want to consider get the sizes of the objects and capture their proportions. It is very easy to add additional objects onto the diagram as you're progressing with your design. You just need to drag an additional object and snap it into existing object. You might also consider expanding your floor plan differently. To do that, we will delete the room that we just dragged into the diagram, and I'm going to use it by clicking the delete button on the keyboard. Instead of building space room by room, we will use this room shape from Microsoft Visio to define external dimensions of our structure. You can start defining the walls by using the wall shape. To do that, you just need to drag the wall shape and snap it into the position. Once you have wall shape selected in Visio, you can drag it by using the circle in the corner, and it will snap it into position and will help define the areas. As you can see, if you drag it slowly, Visio shows grid line, and this green grid line, this is a horizontal location and positioning for the wall. There are multiple ways to define openings in between the rooms. You can define openings like what I have right now by shortening the wall in between two living areas. Or, if you have the entire wall defined, you can also add the opening right in the middle of the wall. After opening is in place, you can adjust the sizes for the opening. Because now our room has two purposes, we cannot define the name of the room by just giving the title to the room. We would have to give title to each individual area. You use it by using text tool in Microsoft Visio. You select the text tool and start typing. For example, you can call the living space on the left as living area. And if you're happy with the title, you can just drag it and position in the right location in the living area. You can copy and paste the title and give the name to another area. Or you can define the new title using the text tool. There are certain items you might consider including into your floor plan diagram based on what you're trying to communicate. In addition to defining external dimensions for the area, you might want to consider include internal walls and hallways. You might consider showing restrooms, windows, and doors. In addition to defining dimensions, you might also consider showing appliances, for example, stove, refrigerator, and other appliances, as well as fireplaces, saunas, pools, and other objects. And what is also very useful on the floor plan diagram is showing the purposes of the rooms, as well as their dimensions. As you add more and more items onto your diagram, you show more and more things. As you go beyond originally defined paper size in Microsoft Visio, you can expand the paper size by navigating to the Design tab and clicking Auto Size. This adds additional page onto the diagram, and you can continue expanding it. As you keep adding walls, Microsoft Visio automatically snaps the wall blocks into the existing rooms. You can do this exercise as a designer by yourself, or you can suggest to the client to join you when you're doing this work on your computer. This way you can get feedback from the client right away. Microsoft Visio allows you not just to add and design new spaces, but also modify existing spaces. You drag the existing shapes that you already have on the diagram and connect them to each other. For example, instead of designing the house, maybe you realize that you need to design a block in the apartment building. As your client's desires might change, for example, from buying standalone house to buying condominium or renting the apartment. As you go through the design process, you might continue adding more and more items and document and suggest different ideas to your clients. For example, you may propose having just one door to the bathroom, or you might propose to have pass-through bathroom with 2 doors. You might also propose wall opening in between kitchen and office area. Or if your client doesn't like it, you quickly undo this and put a door in between. A lot of times, I'm being asked what are the most practical uses of the floor plan diagrams. In addition to helping you determine square footage and preview the design, you can also create furniture layout for the office, for your home, for the actual floor plan, as well as create a site plan or document how HVAC controls are going to work in this living space or office space by building the HVAC plan, create security and access plan, create plumbing and piping plan, electrical plans, and even help people understand how social distancing is going to work in the current living space. The cool thing about Microsoft Visio is that you can keep expanding your floor plan until you get to the right results. For example, you just got an idea that maybe you will benefit from the family room, and you keep adding additional walls and additional structures to see how it would impact you. It is possible that once you give it a title, you realize that instead of the window that we originally put in, which you can delete by using the delete button on the keyboard, you need to add either the door or you may need to add just an opening. And it might be a big opening between living area and family room. Microsoft Visio allows you to move the entire diagram once you select it on the page so you can better position it. To do it, you need to switch to the pointer tool, highlight the diagram by dragging and dropping everything, or you can use Ctrl-A for selection. And keep in mind, as soon as I select everything, it shows the dimensions as well. So if you need to see the dimensions for the diagram, that is the best way to get to it. And once you have everything selected, you can just drag it to the area on the screen where it should be based on your needs. Designing and drawing floor plan in Microsoft Visio is very easy, but you need to keep in mind a couple important considerations. You need to determine the area that you're trying to draw. You need to take measurements if this is an existing area. You need to first focus on the walls, interior and exterior, and separate them in your drawings. You also need to keep in mind architectural features for the diagram, as well as the furniture and fixtures that you would need to place into your drawing. Typically, when you use Microsoft Visio and you need to replace particular object on the diagram, you select the object and use Change Shape option. Unfortunately, this option is not available when you're drawing floor plan. And if you realize that, for example, you need to change the opening between family room and the living room area into the double door, you need to remove the opening and then replace it with double door. To do that, you can select the object and click the Delete button on your keyboard and bring the new object onto the diagram. After you place the object, you can resize it to make it fit the best, based on what you're trying to accomplish. Another way to edit the diagram and reuse some of the things that you've already put together would be to select the items. For example, I can select 3 walls by holding the Shift button on the keyboard and using my mouse. And then I'll use Copy, and then I'll use Paste. Once I have this in place, I can add Garage to my structure and adjust the bottom wall to make sure it fits the opening. Once I have it in place, if I need to change the size of the newly added area, I need to select the area, and I can do it by using the mouse and dragging over that area and selecting it. Or I can select individual walls by holding the Shift button on the keyboard and using the mouse to select and click on the area. And after I've selected all 3 of the external walls, I can drag it, and it will expand the size of the area. In my case, I'm expanding size of the garage. And once I reach to the target area size, I can copy the title by using the Copy button on the ribbon and then paste the new title right in the new area and give it the right name. After I have garage in place, I can add garage doors. And my doors might be for 2 car and then for 1 car. The difference is that the garage door typically do not open this way. So I might consider show the door as closed because the style of the door opening doesn't match garage door opening style. To do that, I need to select the door and I need to drag the opening to make it closed. And I'll do the same thing for the single car garage opening. Once I have them in place and correctly displayed, I may need to adjust it to make sure they match typical proportions of the cars. And once I'm satisfied with door sizes, I might consider adding additional wall in the diagram to create a separator between the garage and utility area. And once wall is in place, I will add an additional door that will allow me to enter the utility area. I will also add a title for the utility area, so anybody looking at the diagram will be able to quickly identify it. So what are the most important considerations when you're looking or considering the floor plan? Obviously, every situation is different, and you should create your own list, but I'll try to share with you my priorities, or something that I always consider. Number one importance for me is versatility and flexibility. When you're doing quality design, you might want to consider making rooms interchangeable. This way, for example, office room can easily be turned into the child's bedroom in the future, for yourself or maybe for your future buyers. Based on your lifestyle, you might want to consider ideal room layout. Room layout might be different for the families with kids or without kids, and some room layouts allow for better entertainment if this is your priority, or better play areas if you have kids. In this section, I typically build a list of no-nos. For example, I don't want to have AC unit adjacent to my bedroom because it creates constant noise in the summer. If you're designing your space, make sure you consider this, as it is hard to change in the future, since most AC units almost permanently connected. Another important consideration for ideal room layout is that bathrooms probably shouldn't face common entertainment spaces like dining rooms or living rooms. And last but not least consideration here is that most people typically like if kitchen opens to the dining room or living room, so whoever is cooking can still interact with guests and keep an eye on the kids playing. Size of the room matters as well. When you're designing the room or hallway, you might want to think how many people can be in the space at the same time. Do they have room to move around, especially after you add furniture? And based on the type of furniture that you're adding, would furniture be able to accommodate all the planned activities? Very important considerations is local code and zoning. What are the restrictions? What are the limitations? What are the things that you can do and cannot do? Physical characteristics of the site are also extremely important. Based on the way house is positioned, some rooms might get more exposure to the sun than the others. And you might consider exploiting the exposure to the sun by adding bigger windows to the rooms that are exposed. Ideal floor plan should also fit your lifestyle and priorities. Since a lot of people work remote now due to COVID-19, it is very important to get ideal light and perhaps a quiet location for your home office. If entertainment is important for you, make sure there is a good flow from the kitchen to the outside space and living room area. If you have kids, and your kids might be involved in the sports activities and you do a lot of laundry, you might want to consider adding a good flow between the laundry collection area and the washer and dryer machine. And last but not least is balancing between architectural details and practical consideration. In addition to having some of those mandatory requirements met, we also want to consider safety of the kids, maintenance and cleaning of the space, how big heating and cooling bill is going to be, how frequently would everybody have to climb the stairs, and whether floors and ceiling windows are tall enough based on our requirements. To validate how useful particular floor plan is for your needs, you can do a virtual walkthrough in your mind. And as you do a walkthrough, you validate usability of each area. For example, you might park when you come back from work right in your garage. You look around and you realize that garage is missing windows. Maybe this is something that should be added if you're still designing the place. You also might realize that you don't have a way of entering the house from the garage. You would need to go outside of the garage and enter through the front door. You also realize that garage is missing the door out. What if garage gate is no longer works? Maybe there's no electricity. How would you get out from the garage? To fix this, you would need to add the door in the garage as well as door in between garage and family room. Now you run through another scenario in your mind. What if I brought my kids and they have dirty shoes and dirty clothes? Do I want to let them get into the house and right into the family room? Do I want to have a space where they can change before entering the house? You realize that maybe you don't need the utility room. Maybe instead you would convert it into the mudroom area. And obviously with the power of tools and floor plan design, you can easily do it right on the diagram. The question you might be asking yourself, do I now need to connect my mudroom into the main living area? You already have a door that connects garage directly with the living area, but maybe that's not the right door. Maybe instead this door should be in between mudroom and the family room. To quickly fix this, you need to cut the door from one area and paste it in another area. And after it's pasted, you just adjust it to make sure it's centered and positioned correctly. As you walk through the space, you realize that maybe mudroom needs a window too, so you can take advantage of the daylight. This would allow you to save on electricity as well. Family room right now missing the windows, and that could be easily fixed by adding a window on both sides. After further considerations and research, you realize that maybe you don't like double doors. It's easy to fix it now. You just need to click the delete button and replace it with just the regular opening. You can expand the opening to make more people be able to go from family room into the living room and from living room into the family room. You might consider doing the same and expanding the opening in between kitchen and the living area. This would allow for the better flow of guests when you entertain people. As you continue looking at the diagram, you realize that the kitchen, office area and bathrooms all miss windows. It is easy to fix right now. All you need to do is to drag windows into those areas to make them brighter and take full advantage of the daylight, as well as save on electricity. There are a couple cool things Microsoft Visio floor plan template allows you to do to enhance your diagrams. For example, I use callouts very frequently. For example, you can add a callout to highlight something important on the diagram. For example, you might need to add a comment, like need to add hot and cold water as well as gas connection and 220-volt electricity connection to enable washer and dryer. And then you connect the comment to the area where you would like to add this information. Another cool feature of Visio you can use is to show controlling dimensions. There is a special shape for controller dimension right on the diagram, and it allows you to show, for example, room sizes or specific area sizes based on your needs. You can rotate controller dimensions to show different sizes, and it also works very well for the odd-shaped rooms. If your room is square, you can show room measurements using the room measurement shape. For example, if you need to show size of the office, all you need to do is to drag room measurement shape into the office and then adjust the shape based on the size of the office, and Visio will automatically calculate the size of the office for you after you finalize all of your adjustments. Title room uniquely identifies room measurement shape and stays on the diagram. All you need to do is realign your title for the room itself, for example, office. This way you have office and then room, and then the size measurements indicate the entire size of the room and show the dimensions for whoever is interested. And last but not least feature is the one that I like the more. It is automatic space calculation. This feature is especially useful if you're trying to calculate the size of the odd-shaped rooms. All you need to do to calculate the size for the space is to drag the space shape and drop it in the room. Once you drop it, it calculates the space, but there is more. If you right mouse click and say auto size, it fills in the area and calculates it for the defined area. Since we already have family room title right here on the diagram, we need to remove the space use title in the space shape. To do that, you do a right mouse click on the shape, click set display options, and change the space use label into disabled. Once you do it, the office title disappears, and all you have is the family room title that you already had, as well as the square footage size for the room. To measure sizes for other rooms, all you need to do is to drag the space object right into the room, choose auto size, and it will calculate the size of the area automatically. Microsoft Visio provides you multiple stencils to help you arrange the furniture. Based on the template that you initially selected to complete your floor plan, you will have access to different stencils. For example, I selected office layout template, and I have access to office furniture. But if you would choose home plan, you will have access to home furniture stencils. In the office layout template, you have access to office equipment, office furniture, and the floor plan stencils, which is represented by walls, doors, and windows. Because I have residential floor plan, where we have residential areas, as well as home office, in addition to the office furniture and office equipment, I would need to add furniture for the residential home. To do that, I need to search shapes for the keyword furniture and add furniture stencil into my diagram. After completing this step, I have furniture for just the home office, and I also have walls, doors, and windows for the floor plan. There are 5 important considerations when you're using floor plan to build the furniture layout. Size and shape of the room is extremely important. Typically, you need to measure the room when you're building the floor plan. The key here is to not just note the room sizes, but also document all the built-in furniture pieces that cannot be moved. Another important consideration is to determine the balance line of the room. Typically, to determine the balance of the room, you divide room into the 4 equal areas. This way, you will be able to arrange visual weight of the furniture on one side of the room to make sure that it is about the same weight of the furniture on the opposite side of the room. It is also very important to consider traffic patterns of how people move within the room. There should be enough clearance area for the person to move within the room, especially in the entertaining areas, where people may go in the opposite directions. For example, in this diagram, some people might be entering the family room, and at the same time, some people might be leaving family room, going to the living room, or even going to the kitchen. Another important consideration is to determine the main feature of the room and build focal point based on the main feature of the room. For example, as person enters the room, what would be the focal point for them to see? Maybe we should add TV unit here so they can see TV playing on, or maybe we can put some of the existing pieces we already have, for example, grand piano. Or if this doesn't work, maybe we can add a fireplace so the person entering the room will just see the fireplace. And last but not least piece here is try an experiment. It is very easy to move shapes on the diagram. Much easier, for example, to just drag grand piano and place it on the diagram in the right spot versus trying to move it in the real life. So what you can do, you can add additional pieces onto the diagram and then get feedback from other people to make sure that you're moving in the right direction. Please consider subscribing to this channel. Skills that you learn here will be helpful for you now and also in the future. You also get opportunity to help other people by answering their questions and helping them solve their challenges. If you like the content, please give this video a big thumbs up. This tells us that you need more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.